Welcome to the August 9th NMRA-PCR Coast Division Virtual Meetup. Today we have I think, an exciting agenda, a few interesting things, and then we'll have a great discussion. First, Earl's going to give us an update on his Milpitas Materials and kind of use what you have. He's going to indicate some very interesting modeling options. I'm building a control panel for taking my modules from ON30 and building them into a room layout. And I'll talk a little bit about that control panel, give a little update, show a few pictures. One of the things I did when I was at the NMRA Convention back in July, which was in Novi, Michigan, I actually took a bunch of videos of all the layouts I went, or not a bunch. I took a reasonably short video of each of the layouts I visited and have turned those into videos with some still photos. And I thought I'd go ahead and run a couple of those every week. Well, I have about 11 or 12 of them, I think. So that should give us basically a couple of months worth of those, and plan to do the same at the narrow gauge convention that's coming up in September. So that's basically the plan for today. And then we'll just go from there into talking about whatever everybody's modeling, what's on your workbench.
Okay. You want me to go ahead, Phil?
We'll talk about his Milpitas Materials. Yep, go for it.
So if you guys were here, I think about a month ago, I had a presentation about Milpitas Materials. This is something that building for Seth Newman's layout. This is another one of those, hey, I got some Walther's parts we should be able to just throw together and make an industry, and it's never quite that simple. So this is a picture of what it looks like. This is kind of where I left off with having the big bins and the core of the structure already, built up that I can start assembling pieces onto. And this is where I left off last time, that all around this core are a number of silos and tanks and filters and God knows what else. And I need to, be doing each of these little things as separate subassemblies. And in looking at the core, I stopped working on the core for now because it became obvious that I needed to get some of the subassemblies built because of the way some of the piping and tubing and connections go. So decided to work on the left side of the structure. And the left side is, these two big, tall tanks, and then or silos, and this, bigger one on the left. And in looking at the silo, this is the left-hand silo. So this is what I've been working on right now. And, looking at identifying features, obviously, is this doorway at the bottom that I decided I wanted to keep open because it's got some interior detail and it looks interesting. The safety cage ladder, the railings, some piping. So this looked, like a reasonable thing to start on. The problem is, what do you make it out of? So like most model railroading projects, I think it's ABS pipe or PVC pipe or sprinkler pipe or something. So 2-inch ABS came out to almost exactly what the tank or the silo diameter was. So getting into the home improvement part of the presentation, a chop saw cuts that stuff really well and really nice and square. The issue I kind of had is figuring out how to make the doorway. The ABS is fairly thick walled pipe, and cutting two parallel cuts down into it is kind of difficult, along with trying to cut that square thing across the top. And, trying to cut and file per square is difficult. So, I realized that if I wanted to cut a square hole, the best tool for it is a round drill bit. So this is what I put together or cribbed up on my drill press. So I took a Forstner bit, and you can see I kind of marked on the tubing the width of the doorway. I adjusted the Forstner bit so that it cut or it drilled the width of the doorway. And the good news with that is it automatically gives you a reduction of wall thickness in the back. And if you look at it after it's drilled, you can see that the walls kind of taper back inside. The tape is kind of torn up because that's just what the drill bit did to it. But, the ABS drilled reasonably well. A little bit of fuzz that he had to cut off with an X-Acto knife, but, it gave me a nice square parallel walls on the way down, a nice square cut at the bottom of where it drilled. So I was really happy with this, and I'm going to kind of keep this in mind. So since I had the drill press out, I needed to make a top and a bottom for this because I did want to do the interior details, and obviously there's details on the top. So I grabbed a hole saw that I had, and the top is 60 mil styrene, and really wasn't looking forward to cutting it by hand. So I thought, well, might as well fire up the hole saw and see what happens. I had the drill press at the lowest speed, but that's still pretty fast for drilling styrene. And it came out, I guess, okay. The one on the right was the first pass, and it kind of got chewed up. You can see there's a step on the edge. The second one on the left looks worse, but it's actually better because all the crumbs on top are kind of semi-melted styrene that just flake off with your thumbs. And then, a little bit of filing and sandpaper, and it actually worked okay. I don't know if I call it better than okay, but it was kind of interesting. The one that
So Earl,
Yeah.
you did have the centering bit in there. I was trying to see if you had the centering bit or not. The centering.
I did. I didn't want a big hole in the middle of, let me see if I can page up. Yeah, you can see it's just a real shallow.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I didn't want a big hole in the middle. This one, I thought maybe that was some of my problem on the other one, so I dropped this down for a hole. This worked the same way, that all this stuff, all this crumbs around the edge just kind of flake off. The drill bit looked to be the right size, but when I put it together, or test fitted it, it was just too small. So I actually went back and traced it and then cut it by hand. And cutting by hand wasn't too bad. I rough cut it with a pair of dikes, just nipping around the perimeter real carefully, and then a little bit of sanding. And it actually worked a lot better. Cutting, thick styrene, kind of a pain in the butt. So the next part of working on the silo is that safety cage. So Walther's has actually some pretty good quality etched brass things out there. Stairways, railings, conveyor parts, and they have the safety cage. So what you have this is 3 cages, these 3 things, and 3 ladders. You take these cages, clip it out, and you wrap that around a dowel or something of appropriate size. And these little tabs go into these little holes, and then you glue or solder it together. And I was a little bit worried about getting the brass bent and getting this stuff all lined up and all that. But after I bent it and did just a little bit of test fitting, it actually came together really well. The only issue, if you want to call it, with this Walther stuff is they've got a 1/2-inch thick layer of varnish on the brass to keep it from oxidizing and keeping it looking nice and shiny in the packaging. So you have to scrape / sand / just burn through it with the soldering iron if you want to solder it. And I soldered each of these intersections. I thought it was stronger and more controllable than trying to do ACC. So I was real happy. And by the way, the whole thing came out to be almost exactly the size I needed. I think I clipped 3 rungs off the top of the ladder, but it fit the whole silo just perfectly. So the next little thing to figure out is you can see there's a kind of a band around the middle of this silo, and trying to figure out how to get it concentric and then how to clamp it in place. So back down to the tool collection, and I dug out a hose clamp. And actually I had seen this recently in a Plastruct catalog where they talked about using a hose clamp around a piece of tubing to mark a horizontal line. And you put it in there and screw it down, and it's pretty close. I had to go tweak it just a bit, with a caliper just to make sure it was parallel, it was horizontal, but it was pretty good. And I really liked it that, you can use it to mark things. You don't, usually we've been using paper, and paper kind of slides around as you're trying to hold it in place. So this worked really good. And it also works good when you want to go ahead and clamp the band in place. There is an issue obviously with where the screw part is, that it's wider and it sticks down, so it's not perfect. But what I did is I glued, if you want to call it, half of it on, let's call this the front side. So I glued this front diameter and then took the clamp off, rotated it 180 degrees, glued the back, and it worked just fine. So really happy with the way this worked out. So the next part is railings. And if you remember the picture, there's a railing all around the top of the roof, and decided to build it from 20 mil brass wire soldered in place. And I wanted to mark the post holes, and I wanted to put the brass wire into the wall thickness of the pipe, if that makes sense. That way it isn't just in the styrene roof, and when you solder things, everything doesn't melt. So really wanted, so the railing is in farther than it would be on the prototype, but I think it's stronger and more durable. So quickie PowerPoint drawing gives me a line to line things up with. Here's the bolt hole diameter, if you want to call it, the railing diameter, and then the intersections. And this is kind of where I am today. I got the railing built. It's all soldered in place, got my band, got the doorway framed. The brass wire pieces sticking out get soldered to the top of the safety cage. But I'm not ready to put the safety cage in yet. I've got to do that filler pipe and some other details. But I'm pretty happy with it so far. So this is where I am right now, and there will be an update, in a couple of weeks on other things that I'm working on.
Excellent. Excellent. That was cool. Yeah, by the way, as a side, Earl, so I hold this up. This is actually sitting here. This is one of those water tanks from Banta for the west side. I'm making basically a water tank for the layout, and I had a real hard time getting this wrapper to go on. And I actually ended up doing two things to get it to go together. I put a 3D piece inside to glue it to, but it's 4 inches in diameter. I bought some 4-inch hose pipes off of Amazon, the same kind of thing, and used a couple of those to clamp this on while I was gluing it, and they worked really well. So if anybody, by the way, I've got multiples of those. So if anybody decides to build one of these, send me an email and I can loan you or give you a couple of hose clamps.
Yeah,
I don't think I have.
Hose clamps worked really well.
Yeah, these are actually, when I get a break here, I'll try to run down and grab them. They have a hand twist on them. You don't even use a screwdriver on them. They're really pretty nice for putting these things together. Anything that's round, hose clamps work well to clamp them together.
Those were clamps out of my garage, so I didn't really have to go buy them.
I didn't have anything that big in my garage. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I just wanted to say that Earl's presentation is sort of really interesting.
Yeah.
One time I was going to build a model of Walnut Creek, and there's the Walnut Creek Aggregates company was right across from the station, but it had all wood sided, the holders for the gravel and cement and so forth were all wood, square, sort of like a coal bin. And I've never gotten to it, abandoned that project.
That's a
Earl,
complete.
yeah, Earl, just a quick question. How are you going to prep the safety cage to put paint on it?
I threw it in my ultrasonic cleaner
Okay.
and that worked good. And I think you might have seen in the last slide, it's partially painted because you got to paint the back before you glue it on, because otherwise you can't get to the back once it's glued in place.
Right.
So Earl, it looked like you bent the feet on that brass safety cage. Each one of the feet looked like it
Yep,
was a
each one
straight
of the
piece.
feet is, yep.
So what did you do to make sure those were all exactly the same? Because it looked like they were very well set exactly the same. Did you use a specific tool on each one when you bent it, or how did you do that?
They talk about, kind of like a brass bending jig where you put a ruler or something and then bend up and all that. That works fine for one side, but once one side's bent, you can't get the ruler to the other side. I've got a couple of pairs of just flat nose pliers, and I just use two flat nose pliers and bent it, kind of pushing down and pushing over, if that makes sense.
Yep. So
Uh,
you picked one the right size to do the bend for the offset.
yeah, I just bend them all by hand. And, there's little tick marks in the etch where the bend is supposed to be. And if you line the pliers up with the tick marks, it bends really well.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
like I said, I was really happy. I was a little nervous about, bending the safety cage and not having it look like a screw or something when it comes out like twisted, but it came out flat and it soldered together, other than the cleaning thing, really well.
Well, so a little challenge that I think we have settled on October 11th, I think is the date. Is that the right date? Let me go at my calendar here. Hang on. I thought I had my calendar open.
Yeah, that's a Saturday.
Is that a Saturday or is it? Let me see which.
It's a Saturday.
Actually not the 11th. Hang on. Let me get the date here we were thinking about for our South Bay event. Actually, October 5th is the date we are looking at to meet in the South Bay at the South Bay Railroad Historical Society. So that'll be our fall meet in the South Bay. Should be October 5th. So Earl, the challenge is to be ready to bring it on October 5th so we can all see it.
I will bring parts. I don't know.
I fully understand.
There's a multitude of little things to be done yet.
Cool.
But I will be happy to do the presentation.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, what I'm probably going to do with these presentations for Earl is I'm probably not going to make them into a clinic video at this point because each one's so short. What I'll do probably is aggregate them together at some point, or do something when we do something at an event like on the 5th and capture it, Earl. Do it that way, because I think each one of these is short enough. We don't want individual little video clips. So, well, thanks. That was great.
Well,
so I was going to talk a little bit. I'm building a control panel. I thought you might find it interesting. So let me share my screen. So what you're seeing here is actually three pieces. The two pieces in the background here are the two built-in modules that I've built so far. I'm taking 4 of my ON30 modules that I have designed to be portable and setting them up in a space where they will mate with some fixed modules that are in the room. The one on the right here is about a 4 by 8 foot module. It's actually connected to the wall in the corner. There's a backdrop there. That's something I'll probably talk about in a future session about doing the backdrop. It's a photo backdrop done with photos from Office Depot. What it's set up is there's a space underneath it right here, and this is the control panel that's designed to roll under there. By the way, this is a corner over here, and there's a 4-foot module that's going to go in between here. That's one I already have. So this was designed to roll back underneath the layout right here. When it rolls back under, there's about 1/4 of an inch between the top of the cabinet and the bottom of the module. This thing is actually built underneath this. There are the fixed rollers, not the casters that rotate around, but these are rollers that only go one direction from Harbor Freight. So it makes it pretty easy to roll it in and out. So the idea was that you could roll this thing underneath the layout, but pull it out when you wanted to work on it. I built it actually about 22.5, 23 inches deep because I bought some tubs at Costco. So I can put 4 tubs here in the bottom. So the cabinet here it's 1/2-inch plywood, just bought from the local plywood yard. It's not high-end plywood because I figure by the time you get done painting it, it doesn't matter that much, that it doesn't need to be cabinet grade wood. I actually was going to go buy hinges, and I was having a challenge and looking online and seeing hinges I wanted. I realized that it was cheaper to 3D print hinges than to drive to the hardware store. So these are actually 3D printed hinges. Basically, they were designed to just take a coat hanger and cut it and put it in as the pin in the hinge. So the 4 hinges took me about 8 hours, 10 hours on the 3D printer, and probably about 50 cents worth of printing. So compared to the cost of driving to Home Depot and buying hinges, it's probably 1/10 of the cost.
Hey, Phil.
Yes.
Do you think those are going to be strong enough?
So here's the interesting thing. I after I printed the first set and played with them, I actually tried twisting them, and they are really pretty strong. They're 2 millimeters on the faces here, but you really can't. Say, hang on, let me go back here.
And these are filament. These are filament or resin.
They were filament prints. They're filament prints, and you can't really see it here. I'll take a closer picture if they're actually ribbed. So where the hinges are designed, so they're interlocking. If you think about the way a door hinge looks, they look just like a door hinge. So I think they're about six or eight, maybe 8 individual pieces on either side. And what I did was I made those so they were thicker and kind of back into that 2 millimeter carrier. What was interesting was when I put this together, I had pushed these in and I'd actually touched them with a touch of super glue on the top to hold them in place. And one of the pins fell out on one of the hinges. So the door was actually only held on by one hinge, and it seemed to actually hold together and didn't break or anything. So all the weight was on just one of the 2 hinges. With the 2 hinges, if you sat on them, I mean, I'm sure you could break them. Don't get me wrong, but it would take some force. But so far it seems pretty good. And then one of the things I didn't want to have was handles because you're going to be operating right here, and this is where the controls are and everything. So I figured if I put a handle down here, somebody would hit it with their knee and complain. So I made these. These are actually, they have a finger hole in them, so you can put your finger through and open the door. And then I made a couple of side handles here that you can use when you push it in and pull it out to kind of guide it while you do that. So fairly inexpensive and cheap way to build a cabinet and put the doors in. Then the other thing I did is, I had 3D printed, and this has been over the past probably 6 months. I've been playing with this and getting it together. The 3 control panels. The left is actually for this end of the room. This is the corner module. This is the module that I'm going to put in place, and this is all the turnouts on the module on the right. So basically, there's a number of things. What I did was 3D printed this. It's actually printed so it's at an angle. It puts flat on the bed, and it's actually printed with silver and then going to black. Some point, if there's interest, I did have a little clinic I did on some 3D printing hints, and one of the things to talk about is how you do this. It's really not hard. You just go into your slicer and pause the print, and when the print pauses, you just have to come out and switch the filament from the silver to the black filament or any 2 colors. I did the same technique on Jim Radke's layout to do the numbers for his staging track. Worked pretty well. And then this is the center. Here are the lights. I have a lighting system on the ceiling. I have 2 2.7K circuits. So those are 2.7 Kelvin LEDs. I have one that's a 6K daylight cert that actually kind of shoots at a little different angle. And then I made, using some bowls I found at Target, I made some blue gels. So these all have an on-off switch and then a dimmer for each one. And these are just 12 volt. They're a PWM light dimmer. I think it was $10 for 2 of them on Amazon. They were pretty inexpensive. And then this is the DCC power system over here, and I'll talk about that. I've got a couple of more. That's actually what I'm working on right now, is putting that together and getting it finished. One of the nice things about building this cabinet, so originally I was going to put a lid on the top, and what I realized was that when I slid this thing back under the layout, this was essentially hidden from view completely. You couldn't see in here. Because this thing's 22.5 inches deep, it gave me a really big area to do all the wiring. So what I've got is kind of 3 wiring areas that follow the control panel. So the left area here will have 4 of these modules with an NCE switch in it, and then a different module for or a different node. The module that I'm installing, the 4-foot module, has wabbits on it. So what I'm doing is just paralleling the LEDs and the push buttons for that. So it won't actually have a switch it. So there'll be 4 switches. There's 9 turnouts that I'm controlling with those. The way those are wired is off the front are the push buttons and LEDs on this panel. These wires that you kind of see coming out and wrapping over back here are for a second control panel, and I'm doing that with Cat 5. So I'm using 5 Cat 5s for the second control panel, and they'll just plug in here, and then they parallel the front panel lights and switches here. So you basically control the turnouts from 2 locations, because there's a peninsula and you want to be able to control it from both sides of the peninsula and not have to walk around. And what I did for the power is I use the concept that you often use under a layout of doing buses. So basically there's a plus 12 volt bus, a minus 12 volt bus, and a common bus. And those feed into these single pole, single throw relays. So you can go from plus 12 volts to minus 12 volts to throw the turnouts and throw the LEDs. And then the other 2 wires here are the DCC. And I'm actually feeding that, as I'll talk about in a moment, off of a power cab. So that actually feeds the DCC for the switches that need DCC power. What I did for 110 and for general power is I bought a power strip, and then this box inside of here, and I probably should have left this open for this picture. I'll do that in a future picture. I bought a latching relay, bought 2 of them for $10 off of Amazon. It's a 12 volt latching relay, so it's basically gets powered by 12 volts. And it has a push button that you can connect. It's got a connection for a push button. So you can essentially push a push button and it turns it on, push it again and it turns it off. That relay is capable of 10 amps at 125 volts. So what I did was I just cut the cord to the power strip, reconnected the neutral and the ground, and then ran the hot wire through the relay in there. I've got a little 12 volt wall wart that powers the relay. So now what I can do is just have one push button. I can turn on everything on the layout with one push button or turn it off. Right now, that push button is on the front panel. It's not installed here, but the push button's right here on the front panel. I'm going to daughter a second push button over by the door, so you can walk into the room and turn the layout on from the door, or you can turn it on from the control panel. And then the third thing I'm doing is this is my DCC control system over here, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So this is the back. I was hoping to use these 2 power supplies to run the lights, but it turned out the way I wired the lighting, you really couldn't use them. So I bought a 50 amp supply, $30 on Amazon. This power supply powers the lights. These 2 supplies provide 12 volts, but then they're cascaded. So you get plus 12 volts, minus 12 volts, or you can get 24 volts. And I'm using that 24 volts to power, you see the Tam Valley boosters I'm installing. And this was a $20 Cat 5 panel off of Amazon. So these 2 plugs here actually go to the modules here, and they actually support all the turnouts. So each of the turnouts is a pair and a Cat 5. And that way, when you want to connect to them from the inside, you just punch down to that pair, and now you can control the turnout. And they're easy to unplug, and it was really easy to install back on the modules. I've got some photos of that. I'll put a larger presentation at some point together on all this. So this is basically a 3D printed control panel. What you notice is that it's actually illuminated from the top. So it's actually got about 8 little LEDs across the top that light it up. On the lighting panel, I actually put in a rheostat so you can control how bright those lights are. And then basically, this is that first switch it. There are 2 push buttons that control the turnouts, and then the LEDs that indicate the direction of the turnouts. And you can kind of see that little handheld door or cabinet door pull right there that you just kind of put your finger through and pull the door open. So this is what I'm working on now is the DCC power system. So what I've got in the bottom here is on the right is the power cab, an NCE power cab. And on the left, I've got a ramp meter. And then I put a switch in because I'm going to have 2 power districts. So you can choose which power district the ramp meter, which power district goes through the ramp meter and which one doesn't. If you look at this from the back, this is how it kind of goes together from the back. The ramp meter just mounts on. There are a couple of screws to mount it on. They just clip on there. And then I copied the panel for the power cab and redid it in the 3D print. So the idea with this was the opening then would let me have a control panel behind it. So this is the control panel I put together. Again, use 3D printing. The beauty of these 3D printers is you can design something like this in half an hour, 45 minutes, and then you just turn it on, and 9 hours later, you've got a print that you can use. So what I did was printed it so that I've got 2 Tam Valley boosters. So what I'm doing is using the power cab just to power, give the input to the 2 boosters and to power the switches. And then the output of these boosters is going to be the track power. Because I had 1 ramp meter and I wanted to be able to have it support both of the 2 boosters, I actually used 6 of these little relays. These are about $12 for 10 of them on Amazon. They're low voltage input. You power them with 12 volts, then they have a 12-volt trigger to trigger them. They're single pull, single throw. So these 2 determine for the red and the black which one goes to the ramp meter. And these then determine whether the ramp meter or the booster goes to the track. And so obviously they're wired backwards. So on this side, when it's powered, this one's getting the boost, getting the ramp meter. When it's unpowered, excuse me, these are the normally closed, go from this side from the ramp meter. When you turn the relay on, these go to the normally opens, which then close, and they go directly to the booster. And these 2 are just the opposite. One of the nice things about this is it puts all the wiring, which gets to be kind of complicated for all of this, totally on the back of the board. And this all came together and works really pretty well. I just marked all of the cables so that they can be easily connected when I put them into the cabinet. You saw that earlier, there were a couple of terminal strips there in the cabinet. And so this is kind of what it's going to look like when it gets done. I need to finish the enclosure around here. I actually bought some mirror panels from Amazon for, I think, $10. They're basically acrylic plastic mirror panels. And I'm going to use those on the sides and probably the back so that it kind of looks pretty cool when you look inside it. And it'll be illuminated so you can actually see everything inside of it. And I think that is it for what I had. That was kind of a little bit of an update.
Hey, Phil, I got a question for you. On your 3D control panels, I understand what you did about, printing the silver and then changing over to black filament. You have to kind of go in there manually and pull out the old filament and push in the new one or something?
Yeah. So I have an Ender 3, and what happens on the Ender 3, and I assume this is probably true for most single filament printers. There are some dual filament printers, but they're much more expensive, quite frankly. What happens is you go in Cura, which is the slicer used for the filament printer.
Yeah.
You actually can go in and you can generate a script that says pause at a layer. So what I do is I go in, for example, let me share this again, and I'll talk to it.
Okay, because I use Cura also.
Yeah, so basically the way this prints is the silver prints flat on the print bed, which means, by the way, there's supports under this black stuff, the black lip here on the fascia, but this back of the print is 2 millimeters thick. I typically print at 0.1 millimeter. It takes longer, but I like the quality, and time really is not that important. My printer spends 90+% of its time doing nothing. So what I do is, because it's the 20th layer is the top of this control panel. What I do is I do two things. I actually, for the 20th layer, and you really can't see it here, but this layer, the print is actually vertical. And I have a way to set that and I use an Excel spreadsheet that lets you determine which layer you want to go which direction.
Yeah.
And so the first thing I do is I make that 20th layer so it prints vertical. And then what I do is I ask it to pause after the 21st layer, which means the first layer of all the lettering is silver. What I found is if you do that, you get less stringing of black across the silver. What happens is in Cura, when it prints that layer, the 21st layer, it'll stop and the print head will go up and it'll go back to a rest position. I'm pretty good at figuring out about when that's going to happen. But even if you're late, it's just sitting there in the print position. And what happens is that actually the temperature goes down. What you do is you push the button to continue the print, and it raises the temperature of the print head back up to the 200 degrees Celsius, which is the print temperature. What I do is when it gets to about 190 degrees, I just pull out the old filament and I have the new one ready to go, pull it off, put the new one in, stick it down in, and it starts printing and prints the new color. And
Okay,
so what
you
happens
have to
then,
do that kind of in real time.
it has to be done in real time. And like this one over here, it actually was done twice. It was done once for the black here, and then it was done a second time for the silver of this lettering on the top. So it is a little bit. Now these guys down here, by the way, were not done that way. These were just printed indented, and I just used a little white paint to fill them in because I didn't want to deal with trying to pause it for those. So yeah, it works pretty well. Like I said, if there's interest, I've got a little presentation I did that I can go through on some 3D printing hints. One of them is that layer tool, which I use almost all the time, because anytime you've got a visible layer, the way the 3D printers the way Cura works is if it's printing a surface, it prints it at 45-degree angles. So it prints one layer like this, one layer like this, one layer like this. So when you get to something that's visible, you want it to print either this way or this way, depending on how it looks. So, for example, when I print the back the back of an F cab, which are the cabinet doors, you want it to print vertically. So what you can do in this tool is you can just print that. You can the spreadsheet, you just pick the layer, and then you can choose which way the print head's going to go in that layer, and then change it back to the 45-degree angle for the next layer. So you just go in and choose which layers you want to print which way. Like I said, I'll put that together. We're trying to do some of these little micro presentations to make it interesting. I'll put that in a future one of our sessions. Maybe, like Earl said, he was going to be ready to do more on his. Maybe I'll throw that in for the next one.
I'll try it sometime.
Yep. Yeah, one of the conclusions I came to was, since I wasn't building a huge layout, I wanted to make the layout that was there look as cool as it could. So I decided that doing the control panels this way would be pretty neat. Any other questions, comments? So did anybody else go to the Novi Convention in Michigan? Anybody? Was I the only person that went? So I guess the first question is, anybody know why Novi is called Novi? N-O-V-I? So apparently when they built the railroad, they built a station, and they built a station where there wasn't a town, and they called the station number 6. number 6, with the
Yeah.
6 being in Greek or in Roman letters, VI. So over the years, the town became Novi because that was the name of the station, which I thought was a very interesting little tidbit about why Novi is called Novi. By the way, what I was told is Novi, the prices on homes in Novi went up 80% in the last like 2 years. And what I was told was because Novi is kind of ideally situated halfway between Detroit and Ann Arbor. So, you know, if you work in Detroit in the auto industry and your spouse works in Ann Arbor in academia, you can live right in between. So interesting community. Anyway, so when I did the layout tours there, what I did was I did a little video, and this is not intended to be a John Abiticola video. It's intended more to give you an idea of what the layout looks like, how it's situated in the room, what size it is, and then took a few individual pictures of the layout. By the way, if you've never been to Michigan and gone on layout tours, I imagine the same is true in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and probably most of those states, even down into Ohio. What are the 2 things you need for great model railroading? Basements and lousy winter weather. If you're not a winter sports enthusiast, what do you do for 6 months in Michigan? You go down to your basement and work on your model railroad. And because you've got a basement, and you know, all these houses, they basically, because of the frost heave, the basement is the same size as the footprint of your first floor of your house. So if you buy a 3,000 square foot house that's got a 2,000 square foot first floor, you're going to get a 2,000 square foot basement. So you got to kind of think about, you know, the California basements are typically about 20 by 24, right? That's a garage. So that's about 480 square feet. So almost everybody in Michigan has a basement that's 3 times the size of ours. So there's some pretty interesting layouts here, and I'm going to go ahead. I got a couple of videos. I'll go ahead and play a couple here, and we'll see if you guys like this. If you do, we'll continue to do it for some future ones. So hang on, I got to find the right one. Okay, so this first one, I'm going to leave this up for just a second and talk about the layout. So first thing I want you to do is look at this. It's basically modeling all of the railroads that were in Southeast Michigan. It's very much a prototype-based railroad. Look at the size of the basement there. I want everyone just to pause on that for a moment. This is a 92 by 33 foot basement, which, you know, if you go through the math, is 20 pushing 3,000 square feet. It's like 2,800, 2,900 square foot basement. The other thing that I wanted to point out here is, you notice it says J and Brooke Qualman, comma, MMR. J is not the MMR. Brooke, his wife, is the MMR. So Jay, what she said was Jay builds the bench work and lays some of the track, and she does everything else. And it's just an amazing layout, and you'll see that as you kind of see the pictures. So let me go ahead and play the video. And feel free to comment if you'd like, as you get amazed. Joe Barker and I were doing this together that day, so that was Brooke in the blue there. This is the track plan. And what's amazing is there are no dividers in this basement. It's all open.
Is it a basement? It's got windows.
It's a daylight basement. And by the way, the CNX main line runs right behind their house. I didn't take a picture of it, but it's right. The grass, if you look out the window there, it goes down, and that's the main line right behind there.
You know, it's daunting to have that big a layout.
Oh, it's amazing, and amazing that she built all. built all these structures. She talked about building some of these stations. She did a clinic on structure building, and it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, just the maintenance of that kind of makes
Yeah.
you makes you worry.
They actually cover the whole layout with visqueen. One of the things that was interesting is she has built all the houses that her and her husband's families have lived in that were identified, and they're on the layout going back, 150 years.
Is that backdrop trees painted?
Yes.
I wonder how they created the roads.
I didn't get into that. Don't know. One of the things she did comment was that, the roads are all very prototypically sized in terms of width and stuff. I'm sorry, I'm moving a little fast, but it was so big.
Scenery is incredible. I know that guy.
Yeah. There, and you can see there, it's on the backdrop where some of those cut out, the printed backdrops from, I think, Walther's.
Did they do any simulations of like early evening where you can see the lights in the buildings?
No, they didn't. While we were there, it just was like this the whole time. I mean, there were like 30 people in the layout, easy, when I was there.
Big enough you could have different time zones at different sides of the layout.
Right. And this station that's pretty amazing how it's all scratch built. And you notice that they've closed the ramps over the aisle there.
Was it based on Air Marquette or what?
Well, it's based on all the railroads that come through Detroit at the time they modeled. It was on that first slide. I thought this was pretty cool, with the narrow gauge servicing the Coke fit. These were all some of those houses that she'd built that were the family homes.
I wonder how to keep this thing dust free.
They put visqueen over it. They have things that go over it with visqueen with plastic. Then they had a layout of where pieces go to cover it. It would be interesting to see a picture of it all covered. I would have enjoyed that. This is the house they live in. This is a exact model of the house they live in. And I blew it. I didn't take any pictures of the house except for this one. This was kind of walking in. You can see the front of the house there behind the pickup truck.
Love
And
it.
what was interesting was there were 3 women there operating the layout. So very interesting. So like I said, that was the most daunting layout of the tour. I was absolutely blown away. So anybody, that's the kind of thing. Wouldn't you love to have that size basement to be able to build a layout in?
I don't know if I
Just-
would or not. Trying to build something that big and maintain it's a bit scary.
That's
Yeah.
the first thing that I came to mind was, it must be great not to have another life
Yeah, I don't
and
know.
not have to sleep.
And I think they have some folks helping them. So at some level.
I'd just like to have half the size of that.
Exactly.
So anyway, so that was the first one I wanted to show today. The second one is actually very interesting. So this guy was, and I think his title, I'm not 100% clear, was either chief signal repairman or chief signal engineer for the CSX. So he was responsible for the signaling system on the CSX, and he has left that job, and he's now the chief engineer for a short line railroad in Michigan. So he built a layout that is totally prototypically signaled. So let me go ahead and start the video here. And so it's not as big. It's only 25 by 37. But it is completely prototype signal, or senior signaling engineer. He has a very large CTC panel. So anyone who's considered a CTC panel, including Seth, this is the place you're going to get panel envy. And we'll close at the end with a prototype interlocking system, which was taken out of an interlocking, I think, in Illinois, and apparently got put on a truck that he was going to deliver to the yard, and ended up being delivered to the back of his house. And it's actually in a room in his garage, and it's wired into the layout. So part of the layout is actually controlled from an interlocking tower, and someone has to be there and operate the interlocking tower to operate the layout. So let me go ahead and run this one and you guys can see it. This is his staging off to the left here. More typical double deck layout. One of the things I want you to notice, you look at this, is notice the telephone lines. And of course, the signaling. And the interlock controls for the turnouts. Very prototypical.
I love the fact that he's got real wires on those telephone poles.
Yeah, and not one or two, but like 12 or on each one. They run the whole length of their everywhere on the layout. It's just, that was what blew me away on this layout.
Yeah, it's just amazing what these guys get done.
Yeah, well, as I said, if you're not a winter sports enthusiast, you got a lot of time in the winter in your basement.
You know, scenery on both of these is just amazing.
These are some pictures of the phone lines. I was totally intrigued with the phone lines.
You know,
And
like,
I asked him about it, and he said basically you put rock and roll on, and you just go in Zen mode doing it for hours doing these.
is that easy line or what did he use? Do you know?
I don't know. I didn't even ask.
It almost looks like fishing line.
Yeah, I think it may be.
Probably the only thing affordable.
I see you had a support line for one of the poles.
Yep.
That's a nice touch.
And this is his dispatch panel, which actually were refurbished actual CTC panels. And that is the, hang on, let me pause it there. So this is out in a room in his garage with a separate door. And so this interlocking panel, this is actually part of the layout that is controlled by the interlocking panel. So if you want to switch this part of the layout, you have to, the dispatcher has to contact or send instructions out here, and they have to actually switch it with the interlocking panel.
This guy's kind of a tower operator then?
Yeah, kind of a tower, exactly, kind of a tower operator built into, like I said, it's, in the garage, in the back of the garage, it's a corner with an outside door into it. On the right, you can kind of see the light coming in. So, and there's a next picture is kind of a picture of the operating session there. So anyway, so that was the second one. Are those fun and interesting to see?
Oh yeah.
Very much so.
Beyond being incredibly envious.
Inspiring and scary.
Yep. And there are a lot more. There are other ones that are equally interesting. So those two were two of the most impressive, though. So you kind of got two of the first ones here in this first session. So with that, now that everybody's inspired and a little bit intimidated, we'll move on to just what's everybody got on their workbench. Anything interesting folks are working on?
I'm going to go in the corner and cry.
No, but you know what? You just got to look outside in January when it's nice and not snowing.
Phil, if you were like you and I and worked in the software industry, 60-hour weeks somewhere else in the country, and you never had time to work on the layout.
Yep. So anybody got anything interesting they've been working on? Want to share or anything exciting or?
Well,
I probably should have done that before I played the videos because that was probably too intimidating. Sure would be for me. So.
Hey, Phil, the only other thing I have maybe to mention, and I'll put something up on the PCR, is Paul Deese is now MMR number 801. So a number of us met up with Paul at his house in Paso the other week and presented the awards to him. So I'll put some pictures
Excellent.
up on the PCR website or on the email list.
Excellent. Outstanding. That's actually something we should probably try to do something maybe when we do the thing in October about the AP program. I don't know. Are we getting do we have, Earl, I guess that's a great question to ask. Are we seeing folks starting doing things on the AP program or?
It comes and goes in
We have-
waves. There's some guy named Phil Edholm been putting in a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, but I got to finish some stuff up. So.
So I'm working on stuff. I don't have any photographs. Earl suggested a couple of meetings ago that I do a backdrop for my 1x6 ON30 switching module. And so I decided to make a 4-inch deep relief so that I'm going to bolt onto the back of my 1x6 module. It's basically going to have an industry and about 2 inches deep of a building. So I'm working on that, and I'm working on a new set of legs. I do legs different. I've been struggling with legs for my modules, and I've elected to put legs on the ends of the modules in between the modules instead of underneath the modules. And so I'm reworking that. That allows me to rotate the module to work on it from underneath when I need to do something underneath the module. So I have this idea, crazy idea of having the legs mount at the ends of the modules on half-inch plywood sheets that drop down to legs. And so those are the two things that I'm working on.
I've got one thing I would probably want to share, or maybe I don't want to share, and I don't know how. I've got, I'm working on, of all things, a very short article for the branch line, and it's just detailing. And I took a couple of pictures of, if you will, before and after, and I think they sort of look interesting. So how do I share this thing? I hit share. Phil, yeah, I can't hear you.
I am muted. I tend to mute myself. If you select share, the upper left window is actually your screen. And if you
Got
share
it.
that, we see what you see, because all the other windows are the video. Yeah, there you go. Cool.
Okay.
And then just go ahead and put your image up.
All right, that's one. And that's, if you will, the before. And this is the after. And it's a very short article about turning this little newsstand, which came as these silly pieces of 3D printing, into a very small detail on the corner of a module. So that's
Cool.
roughly that's what I'm working on. And if I can finish it up and put words to it, we will, we'll have that.
Cool. Yeah, here's if I'll share a quick. This is oh, I'm gonna go ahead and knock your share. You're still sharing there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'm unsharing.
So let me see. I'll see if I can share this. This is not for. Said I was going to go through more detail about how I did it, but this is my this is the backdrop for that module. What you see on the right there, that's where the other control panel goes. And off of this center here, this is where a 12-foot module comes off of this right here. But what I want to show you is the backdrop. So this is a photo printed backdrop. It's actually a scene from just north of Mouse Landing. I shot that with the panorama on my iPhone, and then was processed in Photoshop to create a big image. And it's printed actually as two pieces at Office Depot, and so you can kind of see this is kind of the end of the room. I'm leaving this part here open because it's a nice view out from the room. So I decided not to close the room in. This part right here is actually built out. There are blinds there. So I built it out to go over the blinds. So when you look at it kind of up close, it looks pretty reasonable. It's gonna, when I get all of the get structures and stuff, this was just a structure I had that I just put on it. But that's kind of, I'll go through at some point, I'll go through a little about how I did that. Basically, it's plywood on the wall, and then I used linoleum to give the nice rounding and coving. And then the prints are actually banner prints from Office Depot. They're $70, $50 on sale for a 3x6. They were the same things we used for the banners for the trade shows and that for the PCR. So worked out pretty well as a backdrop.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to get going, so I'm going to wish everybody a good week, a good 2 weeks, and hopefully I'll see everybody next time around.
All right, take care, Jesse.
Have a good
Bye
one.
now.
See you, Jesse.
Well, I think we're kind of probably got done a little early today. Doesn't sound like there's a lot more folks want to talk about. So mark your calendars. Let me go back and make sure I give you the right date again. It's should be October 5th. Hopefully that'll be in the next Coast Extra. An announcement of that is the date. By the way, if someone would like to do a clinic at the Coast Extra or at the Coast Meet in October, let me know. They're still looking for a clinic chair. Need someone to kind of take that on. I think Earl may have something to do there. We'll see if there are some other clinics to be done at that meet. But we are looking for a couple there because we do have the capability of having, 3 clinics, 1 in the back room and 2 in the front room at the South Bay Railroad Historical Society. And also looking for any layouts that folks want to have open. One of the challenges we seem to be having in the South Bay is we've lost a number of layouts in the last couple of years. So, or last year, actually months. So
On that issue, I'd just like to point out that Jack Burgess,
yep.
is dismantling his layout.
So he's actually, the plan is to do it in the summer of 26. And there are a number of there's some different destinations for where the layout may go. But it's definitely going to be, if not in complete, at least in pieces, probably going almost all the layout to different places. But this next year will be the last year probably as a chance to see his layout, in the original location in the garage at the house. My assumption is, by the way, we'll have his layout open on the 5th. So folks will be able to go see it on the 5th if they want to.
Okay, thanks, Phil.
Thanks, everyone. Everyone have a great couple of weeks. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. And keep modeling, take some pictures of whatever you're doing for next time.
Thank you for the clinic at the very beginning, Earl, sharing your tank there.
Oh, thanks, Larry.
Excellent. Everyone have a great couple of weeks. We'll talk to you later. Bye now.
You too. Thanks so much.